For those who don't know me, I'm Cheryl. I work at the hospital, and I'm sure many of you do realize that February is Heart Health Month, and we thought that we would have an education session, and John Raymond, physician's assistant here for cardiology, who's been doing cardiology for 30
plus years.
33, 34 years. So he is a wealth of knowledge, and we're very excited to have him share that with all of us. So I will leave it to John for you.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here. Oh, thank you very much. And you guys suffered through all this snow and stuff just to be here. I really appreciate you being here and sharing this. First of all, do you hear? You can hear through, everybody can hear okay? It's great to be here, and it's always a special place to come back home and to come back to the St. John Valley to talk about people in the St. John Valley. I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world because I get to practice in Presque Isle now after being in Bangor for 23 years. And being back home in the county always is great because all my patients are wonderful. And I say that because I have students that come with me all the time. I have students from University of New England coming with me just about every 6 weeks. A new person comes in. And they always say, "You have the nicest patients I've ever seen." And I say, I know, because these are the type of people that we are. So thank you for being here. Again, it's an honor to be here and to also be with you to share some information about heart disease. And we do know that heart disease is still the #1 killer in the United States. And in Maine, heart disease is the number 2 killer in all of Maine except for Aroostook County. In Aroostook County, it's the #1 killer, cancer being the second one. And the rest of the state is just vice versa. And there are reasons for that, and that's why I'm here, because there is something unique about the people in Aroostook County, and specifically in the St. John Valley. Because in St. John Valley, there are many different people who are under the influence of French Canadian. I mean, we all are from French Acadian or French Canadian descent. And we do know that there are some unique properties of this because back in 1990, there was a large researcher out of the University of Texas. There were 2 researchers by the name of Brown and Goldstein. And they were looking at a specific thing for cholesterol called the LDL receptor. The LDL is a bad cholesterol. And one of the populations they were looking at that had very high cholesterol, very high LDL, was in an area called Rivière-du-Loup. Now everybody knows that's about, what, 50 miles away from here? It's an hour's drive, and it's mainly French Canadians. And in that population, there are many people within the ages of 20 and 30 who have very, very severe heart disease, have had strokes or heart attacks in their 20s and 30s. They have very high cholesterol. And those types of, that generation of people who have this have descended into the St. John Valley and into the county. And that's still probably one of the main reasons why there's still a major problem with heart disease in Aroostook County, is because of this descent. Now those 2 researchers, Brown and Goldstein, back in 1990, actually won the Nobel Prize for this research that they did that relates to people just 50 miles north of here. So we're very important as far as cholesterol research in all of the world. And when you look at an area, how many people know where Chicoutimi is? Chicoutimi, Quebec, right? Do you know where that is? Chicoutimi, Quebec has a population in there of patients who have very high triglycerides. Now, triglycerides are blood fats, and they come from fats in your diet, sweets in your diet, or alcohol. Now, it's not because people up there drink a lot, but they have a genetic defect that causes them to have very high triglycerides. And those high triglycerides can cause pancreatitis. Pancreatitis is when your pancreas gets inflamed and you get very, very sick. sick if you have pancreatitis, and some people even die from it. But they're related to cholesterol. They're related to fats in your diet, or fats in your system. This population, Shikutsumi, that population is the highest population of this problem in the world. And they've been identified by that, over the last year. And there's a lot of research going into that by a guy by the name of Godin. Dr. Godin is doing a lot of research in that area. So there's a couple of things that are very important to this population up here in Aroostook County. But that's part of the reason why we love to be here, because we love the snow, we love the cold, we love to be here, we love the beauty, and this is what we call home. Because we have this genetic makeup doesn't mean that we die any earlier than others. As a matter of fact, nowadays there are many different medications that can help to lower triglycerides, help to lower cholesterol, help to lower LDL, and there's some new research coming out all the time. So all of that progresses to people living much longer. As a matter of fact, if you look at people around here, you find that the longevity of how long they live is probably more than most of the average in the whole country. And that's the beauty of it. Why? I can't answer that. But I think it's because of what we do as far as hard work, as far as surviving. Some of our winters, we work hard. We're used to hard work. And the exercise that we do to stay active, to survive, has really helped us to live long lives. What can we do to try to prevent heart disease? Because as I told you, in Aroostook County and in St. John Valley, the #1 killer is heart disease. Number 5 cause of heart disease, of death, is stroke. And what I'm going to do is touch upon both. I'm going to touch upon heart attack prevention and stroke prevention, because they really go hand in hand. They both have to do with the buildup of cholesterol in our arteries called atherosclerosis. And that's when cholesterol builds up in our arteries and causes these problems to occur: strokes and heart attacks. There are 5 things that you can do to try to prevent you from having a stroke or a heart attack. The first one has to do with something that none of the people in this room do, and that's smoke. If I look around, I can tell that nobody in this room smokes. And if you did, I'd tell you to quit smoking, right? But I'm also going to share with you one thing, because as our children encouraged us to quit smoking years ago, we have to, as grandparents, and we have to encourage our children and our grandchildren to not smoke. I remember that when I was a kid, I always wanted to listen to what my grandmother and my grandfather said. Why? Because I respected them so much. And so the same thing can happen now, because if you have, let's say, a grandchild who is having a problem and wants to try out the smoking, which can happen when you're a teenager and going through that phase, then it's important to you to encourage them to quit. And if they're in their 20s and 30s, especially females who are on the birth control pill, we want them to make sure that they quit smoking, because smoking and the birth control pill do not go together at all. They have a much higher risk of developing a stroke, even at the age of 20. So it's important that they learn about that, and you can help to spread the word to them as well. So that's one thing. If you smoke, you got to quit. If you don't smoke, don't start. Number 2 has to do with high blood pressure. We want to make sure that your blood pressure is under good control. Now, about 2 years ago, there was new guidelines come out by the American Heart Association to tell us what they felt was the right blood pressures to be at. And they come up with some more strict guidelines that really helps us to guide where we should be putting efforts in trying to prevent high blood pressure from occurring. Their new guidelines say that if your blood pressure is higher than 130, and a diastolic, which is the bottom number, is higher than 80 to 89, that's considered now high blood pressure. That's different than before when it said 140 over 90 used to be the old guidelines. The new guidelines say if your blood pressure is above 130 to 139, you're considered in what we call stage 1 high blood pressure. Now that doesn't mean you have to rush and get blood pressure medications if that's the case. It does mean that you have to watch your lifestyle, reduce your weight, reduce how much sodium or salt you take in, and the third thing is to exercise on a regular basis, because all of those will help to lower your high blood pressure to where it becomes normal or low blood pressure. So anything above 130, 139 on the top number now is considered high blood pressure stage 1. And if you're at blood pressure of 140 or higher on the top number, that's considered stage 2. And most of those patients should be on some type of medication. Blood pressure is the type of thing, lower is better up to a certain point. If your blood pressure gets too low and you start to get dizzy, then we have to back off on some of the medications that we give you for blood pressure. Okay? So the things you can do right now, watch your diet for salt, exercise on a regular basis, and lose weight. If you can lose a few pounds, that will reduce your blood pressure to where it can be in the goal. Okay, questions on that?
Yeah, what if you can't exercise?
If you can't exercise, then you have to put more stress upon your diet, weight loss, and salt reduction, and that's where medications may be needed as well. Okay? What's the third thing? Yes?
I have low sodium, and she makes me take pills for that.
Yep.
Does that consider to be high sodium?
The question is, I have low sodium and then I take salt tablets for that. And so that probably will help also to raise your blood pressure. Now, if it raises it, because you take that pill, raises it too high, because now you're taking more salt than you should, then you may need blood pressure to lower it while still keeping your salt content. It's a very good question, and that's a rare condition, but it can occur. It's called hyponatremia, or low salt. It's a fancy word that just means low salt, low sodium. Okay. Now, number 3 thing, I said smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol is the third one. High cholesterol has to do with the type of fatty type of deposits that lines up the inside of the arteries and basically clogs them up so that now you have restriction of blood flow going through, and if it happens to arteries going to your heart, it can cause a heart attack. If it happens to arteries going to your brain, it can cause a stroke. So lowering the amount of saturated fats, those fats that are high in bad cholesterol, will help to lower your cholesterol levels as well. In other words, what you have to do is you have to reduce the amount of saturated fats that you take in. Now, what are in saturated fats? What kind of foods have saturated fats? Does anybody know?
Sweets.
Everything.
Usually sweets are carbohydrates. Those are a little bit different. What is it?
Everything.
Everything, right. Everything good. Everything good will be a part of saturated fats. McDonald's is very high in saturated fats. Why? Because of fried foods. Anything fried will be put in through grease, which is saturated fat. Lard is saturated fats. So anything cooked in that type of stuff will have high LDL. It will raise your cholesterol. What else? Red meats, right? So if you're eating red meats, try to get the fat off of it, and try also to get a lean meat. So if your hamburger, even though it costs a little bit more, but if it's 90% or 95% fat-free, that's better for you than the 80 to 85% fat. Does that make sense? As an example, if you're eating steak, make sure that's one that has the least amount of lean meat, cholesterol or fat on it as possible. Eggs. Let's talk about eggs. The egg yolk contains a lot of cholesterol. As a matter of fact, if you have a problem with your heart or strokes in the past, you should reduce the amount of eggs that you eat to 3 a week. And that includes the eggs that you cook with. So that's not a whole lot. Now, you can eat egg beaters or things that have like egg whites all you want. That's fine, because that's a good source of protein. But I'm talking about the yolk inside the egg. That's where the cholesterol is. What else would have high in saturated fats?
Cream, dairy.
Creams and dairies. And the one that nobody wants to hear about, cheese. No, I hear that every time I bring it up.
We had that for dinner.
That's right. Cheese is high in saturated fats. It's also high in salt. So if you're trying to watch your blood pressure and you're trying to watch your cholesterol, cheese is not a good choice. I know, everybody's disappointed. Whole milk is higher in saturated fats. 1% or fat-free milk is much better for you. The cream that you put into your coffee, probably not the best. Okay, so try to avoid those types of things that will help to reduce your bad cholesterol and help your arteries feel better. You know, going back, this is February's Heart Month. It's a time where we need to look back and see what we're doing about keeping our hearts healthy. And let me give you a little bit of something that's interesting to point out the importance of that. How many times do you think that your heart pumps every day? How many times does your heart beat every day? Anybody want to guess? You know that it's 60 to 80 times per minute. All right, so if I check your pulse, most of you will have a pulse between 60 and 80 beats per minute. How many times is that in a day? Does anybody want to guess? 5,000 higher. 8,000 higher, much higher.
Much higher?
Much higher.
16,000.
16,000, much higher.
20 hours.
20,000. You want to do the math? You got a calculator? Anybody got a calculator on their phone? 40,000 higher. Any other guess?
Because it beats when you're sleeping too, so.
That's right. If it doesn't beat, you're in trouble. That's right. Higher than, twice as high as 40,000 is 80,000, right? Higher.
That much?
Who said 96,000? All right, she's got a calculator or something, or else she's very smart. It beats about 100,000 times a day. All right? Very important to keep it healthy, right? How many gallons of blood does it pump in a day? Anybody want to guess? Give me a number.
200,000.
How much?
200,000.
200,000, a little bit too much. Okay. Gallons, I'm talking gallons, you know, a gallon of milk. Gallon of milk. How many times? How much?
1,000.
Higher. More than 1,000. Double it. 2,000 gallons a day. This heart that's the size of your fist. That's how much blood it pumps and how many times it works every day. So think about that when you start eating that McDonald's food or some other types of fried foods that you want to eat. You got to keep that heart healthy, because once it's damaged from a heart attack, can't fix it. It's just the same way that if you have a stroke, once you have a stroke, you can't fix it.
How about pasta?
Pasta is high in carbohydrates. It's mostly carbohydrates or sugar inside of it. It's a starchy food. Those will raise your triglycerides a lot. So if you're trying to lose weight, or if you're trying to reduce your triglycerides, then you should stay away from things like pasta pasta, rice, limit the amount of potatoes that you eat, reduce the amount of sweets that you eat. Desserts, I know. I'm full of disappointment here, I know. But this is what you need to do to keep healthy, yes.
I have a question. They say to watch what we're eating and everything, but isn't everything like in moderation?
Absolutely.
Not like an everyday diet of eating pastas or sweets or things like that. If we eat it maybe once a week or, would that still do damage?
Good question. The question she's saying is, what if we do it everything in moderation and we only eat pastas maybe once a week, or we have red meats once or twice a week? Is that okay? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not here to say you need to be vegetarians. I'm here to say that watch the types of foods and make sure that you don't overachieve in one type. Yes?
Right now, I don't know if anybody knows about this new diet that's so much there, the keto diet.
Keto diet. Does anybody know?
A lot of people are talking about it. It's like the best thing ever.
Yeah.
You got to eliminate all of these things, for certain time.
They also put a lot of butters and stuff in there, which is not good for the heart.
Okay, the question comes in, what about this keto diet that everybody's talking about? The keto diet the word keto comes from ketones. Ketones is a breakdown of fats. Now, we do know that if you just ate fat and didn't eat protein and carbohydrates, but in moderation, then your weight probably would go down, believe it or not. But the problem would be is that your cholesterol and your LDL would go high. Okay? So keto diet is not what I would recommend. Okay? Because yes, you may be losing weight, but you're clogging up the arteries. Okay? Because you're bringing in more saturated fats than you need. The better diet is what we call either a Mediterranean diet that is high in vegetables and fruit and less in carbohydrates. Let me tell you a secret. If your goal in the diet is trying to lose weight, there are two things you need to do. One is to reduce the amount of carbohydrates that you eat. White breads, pastas, pizza, potatoes. By the way, pizza has a lot of salt in it. I don't know if you knew that. Okay? But you have to stay away from those types of foods if you're trying to reduce your weight. Stay away from the sweets, the ice cream, the chips. Anything that is snacks are usually high in carbohydrates. That's number one. And number two has to do with you can't eat as many calories in a day as you usually do. You have to cut down on the amount of food that you eat, the size portion. So if you have a meal that's this big, you have to cut it down by at least 25 to 30% size. So instead of 2 scoops of potatoes, it's maybe 1 scoop of potato. And that's it. Because how many times do we go out to eat, especially when you go to an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you walk out of there saying, I don't feel good. I am so full. Why do we do that?
What about Chinese?
Because we want to make sure we get every penny out of that buffet that we can, right? That's right. We're all the same. We want to get our money's worth. What a deal we got. But boy, do I feel terrible afterwards. And by the way, I gained 5 pounds that week.
He was asking about Chinese food.
What about Chinese food? Chinese food is high in sodium or salt. So if you have a problem with blood pressure, definitely stay away from Chinese foods. MSG is a type of thing that, again, I would cut down on that as well.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay? Because a lot of people are also allergic to MSG, so you have to be careful there. All right? So, have I discouraged everybody?
Yeah, what's for dinner?
Good news is coming up, okay? So we talked about smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, LDL especially, the bad cholesterol, and also cutting down on triglycerides, which brings us to number 4. The fourth thing you need to do is you need to lose weight. You need to get to your ideal weight. Now, some people are already there, and that's great. But if you're not at your ideal weight, then you need to cut down. How do you know if you're at the ideal weight? Well, what some people say, well, stand naked in front of a mirror and look at yourself.
Scared.
And then you can tell if you're at your ideal weight or not, right? Because if it looks like you don't look quite like you did when you were 20 years old or 30 years old, then maybe it's time to lose some weight. And that's the hardest thing for people to do. And it relates back to what I talked about with triglycerides. Triglycerides, you stay away from fats, sweets, and alcohol. All three are empty calories that will cause you to increase your weight. So you cut down on those, you cut down the amount that you eat, cut down on your sweets and your carbohydrates, and you're going to lose weight. I can promise you that. And I'll put that in writing. It's a warranty. I'll guarantee that you'll lose weight if you do that. Okay? So, tonight when you go back home, look yourself in the mirror. Yes?
Why is it that, for example, I have a brother that eats hell of a lot more than I do, sweets and whatever, and he's this slim.
Yeah.
And look at me.
Don't you hate that when that happens? The question is, how come some people can eat all they want and not gain a pound, and I look at food and I gain 10 pounds? Absolutely. There's a lot of us, and there's a lot of reasons for that. The biggest reason has to do with our own metabolism. How do we burn off those calories? And everybody's different. And as we age, our metabolism, we know, slows down. Some people are blessed to have good metabolism, and it just, no matter what they eat, they stay slim. Other people, just the opposite. So to answer that question, it has to do with how they burn it, their metabolism, and everybody's different. It has to do with thyroid sometimes. That can be an issue, but most of the time it's just the way that they burn off calories. Okay. So number 5. Already 4, we're up to the last one, number 5. What do you think it is? What's the one thing that you can do for yourself to prevent you to help you lose weight, prevent you from having heart attacks or strokes?
Exercise.
Oh, exercise. You guys hit it right on the nose, exactly. Because if we took everything good that exercise does and put it in a pill, none of us would be here, would be somewhere in a beautiful mansion somewhere on the beach. Okay? Because it does everything right. Exercise will do everything right. It lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your cholesterol, it lowers your triglycerides a lot, it thins out your blood so you don't develop clots. It really helps everything. So how much exercise should you do? Question is, you should exercise at least 3 to 4 times a week for about 30 to 40 minutes each time.
What do you consider exercise?
Good question. What do you consider exercise? The way that we describe exercise is anything that's rhythmic and continuous. Rhythmic and continuous. Walking is a good one. Cycling is another one. Cross-country skiing is excellent, all right? Things such as snowshoeing can be also excellent. Rhythmic and continuous for 30 to 40 minutes at a time. Now the question is, how hard should I work? Because it's nice to see people gather and stuff at the gym and they're walking and they say, oh, that's wonderful. And at the end of 2 months, they say, I haven't lost a pound, right? You're still giving your body benefit by exercising, no matter what speed you go. You're going to definitely get some benefit. But the way that you guide how hard you should be working has to do with how you're breathing. So if I'm walking here and we're walking together and we're going along and I'm having a conversation and I'm able to have a great conversation, tell them all about my grandchildren, all about what I did and stuff like that, then I'm going too slow. But if I'm walking and I'm able to still have a conversation, but I'm having a little bit of difficult time getting the words out because I'm a little bit short of breath, then that's ideal. If, however, I'm walking, but I'm so short of breath, I can't even get a word out, way too fast. So guided by how you're pushing yourself, how you're breathing as you walk, you should be able to converse with somebody, but it's a little bit difficult. Okay? And that's important. So 5 items: smoking, high blood pressure, high cholesterol reduction.
Stress.
I want you to lose weight, get to your ideal weight, that's important, and also exercise on a regular basis. If you follow those 5 steps, the Heart Association and everybody would say you're doing everything possible to reduce your risk of having a heart attack or stroke. Because again, if you have one of those events, you can't go back. You can't fix it. You can't fix a stroke. You can't fix a heart attack because those are permanent damage. Our goal is to have you look at those things and prevent them from happening. And that's really where your efforts should be. Okay? Questions on anything? Yes?
Though that they've had a heart attack or a stroke or something, I mean, it's discouraging to hear you say that it can't go back or anything, but we can, like, prevent to have it again.
Good. The question is, well, what happens if you had a heart attack? Right? Am I doomed? No, but anybody who's had a heart attack has a higher risk of having a second heart attack. Okay, we know that. Okay, but there are medications. The good news, there are medications that will help not only to prevent that from occurring, but also there are medications that will help to balance how your heart works and the demands of your heart. Patients who have what we call congestive heart failure. Congestive heart failure is a condition where you start to have shortness of breath caused by your heart not being strong enough. Okay? And as a matter of fact, I'm on a large program statewide right now to develop a program for those people. And we've developed a great program that has helped a lot of people to prevent them from getting readmitted into the hospital. And that's our goal. And also that they're able to stay home longer without having to be hospitalized. The way that we do that are in many ways. One has to do with medicines. The other one is to balance how much salt you take in, because we know that if you take in salt, your fluid increases dramatically. Salt is like a sponge in your body. So as you take in water, it just keeps it there. So if you take salt in, it keeps the water from being let go, so that you get more fluid and too much fluid and it backs up into your lungs. The other thing is to monitor how much fluid you drink. And those are only for people who have had heart attack or who have a weak heart. Nowadays, there are special pacemakers, for example, that will help the heart regenerate and work better. It doesn't regenerate the muscle, but it helps the heart pump better. So there's a lot of things that can be done nowadays. Yes?
There's so many products out there for us to eat and everything that there's a lot of sodium in it. What do you recommend is the highest we can have?
Wow, great question. And the question has to do with how much sodium should we really take in every day? Is that the question? As you read labels, if you look at the label and it says that the sodium content in it is greater than 300 milligrams per serving, take it and put it on the shelf. You don't need that one.
Higher than that to me.
All right, if it's higher than 300, put it back on the shelf. Because the total amount that you should be taking as far as sodium each day should be less than 2,500 milligrams. Now you say, boy, that sounds like a lot. But when you look at the type of foods that you eat, you'll find that a lot of them will have higher, even higher than 300 milligrams per serving. That's only one part of your meal. So if you add it all up, it should be less than 2,500 milligrams a day.
What about the TV dinners?
TV dinners, look at the label. They usually have about over 1,000 per serving of sodium, salt. So things like TV dinners are some things that you should avoid if you're lowering your blood pressure, and if you're if you have congestive heart failure and you're staying away from salt, those are things you've got to stay away from. Yes?
We have a dollar store in Madawaska.
Yeah?
And a lot of people are just crazy about how the meat is so inexpensive and everything. And I tell them, look at the sodium content in there.
Right.
Because the sodium content in a dollar store meat, it's crazy.
Well, it's not only in the dollar store, it's any store. You have to be a smart shopper when it comes to salt, okay? And we now know, there was a study that I saw from the Heart Association showing that you say, well, I don't put salt on my food. Well, that's okay, that's good. The salt on your food only represents 7% of the salt that you take in. 7%, a very small amount of the total salt that you take in. 70%, over 70% comes from the foods that you eat. Processed meats, foods such as we talked about, crackers and chips and things like that are high. Cheese is high in salt. All of those are very high in salt, and those are the ones you have to stay away from. So look at the labels. If it's more than 300 milligrams per serving, put it back on the shelf. And the total should be greater, no more than 2,500 milligrams a day. Yes?
Is there a difference between Morton salt and sea salt and...
Good question. Good question. The question is, there's many different salts out there. Are some the no salt, for example? I tell people just to avoid all of them. If you have high blood pressure and stuff, avoid all of them. Even the no salt it doesn't have a lot of salt in it, but it has a lot of potassium. And the potassium can actually be bad for your system if you have too much potassium that you take in. So you have to balance everything and try to avoid the salt as much as you can. Yes?
If you substitute like wheat pasta or brown rice, is that better?
Good question. If you're substituting wheat pasta or brown rice, is that better? Yes, in most cases that's lower in the type of starch that you need to eat. Yes.
How about those gluten-free products they have now?
Gluten-free products, again, it depends on what you're looking for. Are they high in salt? They could be. They're just high in gluten. Okay, so gluten is just some people can't tolerate. They get sick to their stomach and they have a lot of diarrhea and stuff if they take in too much gluten, and they just don't feel good. So for those people, they have to be on a special gluten-free diet. But as far as heart disease and stuff, there's no real relationship there between a low gluten foods and heart disease. There's no connection. Good question, and you're asking the questions that's exactly what I wanted to also point out today that are important highlights. So very good. Any other questions that people have? Thank you very much for coming, even on a stormy day, and thank you for being here, and thanks for the questions. All right, thank you.